Okay, thank you, Timmy. I'm taking a different route now in presenting what I'm going to talk about today. It's kind of things that I've been thinking about since I started working with the capabilities approach and the groups of people that I've been working with. So it's a multi-conceptualization of inequality and the implications it has for human development, trying to think about it from a capabilities perspective. So these are ideas that are in my head. I haven't really written anything about it. So I'm really looking forward to your contributions, your suggestions, and how you think I can actually make this thinking better. So just to start off, there have been different ways to think about inequality, and the ones that are common that we all know about issues to do with income inequality, and then also in terms of poverty, particularly the differences between the urban and the rural areas, and then also educational inequalities that we normally see in issues to do with access, particularly students from different backgrounds. And the other one, the common, is the gender inequality, and we see this in different activisms that happen on campus, as well as generally around the world. And my interest in inequality is influenced by Amartya Sen's idea of inequality of what, and from the book I got that inequality is related to various factors that hinder the extent of human freedom and thus decrease the ability to function. And I also like what Elizabeth Anderson, the person who reviewed the book, said about inequalities. She said that what we need to be cognizant of is that as we pursue the subject of inequality, in the space we seek to address these inequalities, we need to take into consideration individual aims, talents, social identities, and circumstances, and that what this actually mean. And for example, inequality for a certain group may actually mean inequality for another group. And therefore, when understanding freedoms, we need to understand that freedoms can vary from individual to individual. And just to give you a brief background on why I'm interested in the concept of vulnerability. Rather, when looking at inequality, I'm interested in vulnerability, marginalization, and disadvantage. And this is based on the studies that I've worked on. The first study is my master's thesis. I looked at the challenges of vulnerable young people in Orange Farm, particularly the challenges that they have when they want to access higher education. And in defining vulnerability, I used Barbara Mitchell's definition, where she says that vulnerability has, for a long time, been defined in different and unclear ways, and its multidimensionality and the need to approach the term in an interdisciplinary way is lacking. And then she says that traditionally the term has been used to describe powerlessness, precarious conditions that limit the physical body to function. And then she says the concept is used to highlight defenselessness, insecurity, and exposes individuals to different risks. I also love what Chambers said in relation to Barbara Mitchell's definition. Chambers wrote that although it still lacks a developed theory, vulnerability has to do with certain indicators such as lack of access, and lack of access to shelter and education, and these can be used to determine the extent of vulnerability. And Barbara groups vulnerability into three concepts, which I find very interesting. The first concept is dependence on others, and she says this form of vulnerability can be defined in terms of the goods and the good things that one values, and whose care one partially entrusts to someone else, and who has discretion over one. She says, in essence, the concerned individual's interests are affected fundamentally by other people around them. she goes on to talk about unpredictability, and she says there are various reasons for unpredictability of human experience. And the character of human nature is that you cannot really predict what someone is going to do tomorrow. So based on that, it places us all at a vulnerable position. The last term that she uses, irreversibility, and she says irreversibility of past sufferings and painful experiences cannot be undone. And this form of vulnerability can be seen as narrative trauma from other people's wrongdoings. And she says, it points out that all people at some point in their lives experienced pain caused by harmful actions of other people. There are also some individual experiences, such as living in absolute poverty. The other concept that I'm interested in is the concept of marginalization, and I use Alice Young's definition of marginalization. She says it occurs when a group is pushed to the outer edge of society and expelled from useful participation in social and economic life, and as such deprived of basic resources. When a group is deprived of access to resources, they cannot convert their capabilities into functionings. And Young perceives this as the most dangerous form of oppression that exists. The third concept that I'm interested in is disadvantage. And I use Wolf and Dishal's definition. They say that they propose that we think about disadvantage in terms of a lack of genuine opportunities to pursue what each person values, that is to achieve secure functionings. So based on these definitions, I was reflecting on what these concepts mean in relation to the work that I've done. The work that I've done with the orphans in Orange Farm and the refugee youth in Joburg, as well as the first-year students here that are from low-income households. And I've been trying to think about what the three concepts mean from an inequalities point of view, what similarities and differences can be drawn from these three concepts that speak to issues of inequality. And while I was thinking, based on the data that I analyzed for the different studies, a lot of things emerged to actually speak the same thing. For example, you may say someone is vulnerable, yet at the same time they're also disadvantaged, or someone is vulnerable but they're actually marginalized. So I found a lot of interlinkages between the three concepts, and I'm trying to think of how these three concepts can be unified from a capabilities perspective, and we come up with a framework that actually, when you speak about inequality, we encompass all these three different types of concepts. So the diagram there shows how the different vulnerabilities actually interlink with marginalization. For example, if we look at marginalized migrant, they are in a way vulnerable, and at the same time they are also disadvantaged. So I decided to put this in a table, try to separate how I can show the similarities and differences. And in terms of vulnerability, what is revealed by the concept of vulnerability, well, based on the studies that I've done and my understanding, is that it is influenced by personal and immediate environments. For example, stuff that is kind of speaks to the person individually rather than structural factors. For example, it can do with your past experiences, your parents, your current living conditions, and what is concealed is the extent to which individuals have control over these circumstances, which is actually where Barbara Mitchell's three ideas of vulnerability come in. And when I was analyzing the data, strong issues that came out capabilities, the valued capabilities, and issues to do with conversion factors, as well as individual agency trying to change their situations. And when it comes to marginalization, this was in relation to the migrant youth that I spoke to. What is revealed by this term in relation to refugee context is that it is largely influenced by structural factors. And these factors include policies, migration policies, refugee policies, policies in relation to access to education. But what is concealed is the extent to which individuals can actually influence the structures that exist around them. But when I was analyzing the data, also capabilities, conversion factors, and agency came out strongly as valued by the young people. With the concept of disadvantaged, what is revealed by this concept is that it is influenced by both personal and structural factors as well. What is concealed is the extent to which individuals can influence the structures as well, similarly like marginalization. Also coming out strongly from the data that we gathered from first-year university students here is that the issues to do with capabilities and conversion factors as well as agency. So this is where I'm kind of struggling a bit at the moment, trying to come up with a framework that incorporates the CA as well as the different kinds of inequalities that I've highlighted. So I put vulnerability and marginalization and disadvantage inside the ecosystem, and agency and capabilities are kind of outside, speaking to those three conceptualizations of inequality. So what would multi-conceptualization add to what we already know? I think the argument or the point of departure for me is that we don't view marginalization separately, but rather we should also include disadvantage and vulnerability. And in this way, it will be very easy to understand inequality, because when you speak about inequality, all these three concepts actually are evident in most of the work that we do with inequality. And this is also important for me because I think that it kind of provides a different way of looking at inequality. And by making this discussion, I'm hoping to point to some of the, well, I've pointed out some of the important similarities and differences. I'm trying to find a way that the conceptualization can provide a different lens of looking at different kinds of inequalities when we work with the people that we work with. And I would like to play a video which in my view actually speaks to marginalization, disadvantage, and vulnerability. It's not playing on the screen.
Just try clicking on the slide view thingy again. So down there. See if it'll renew it, and then use the cursor to press play here. Do we have any tech-savvy people in the room?
Can you drag the frame
into view
into the view of the project?
We have to decolonize.
Was moving? Yeah. Yeah, was moving. from downtown Johannesburg. Hello and welcome. Now, how is it possible that a school that receives no government funding, where most children are not paying school fees and teachers are not getting salaries, achieves an overall pass rate of 94%? Well, that's the story of Albert Street School. It was started in 2008 to accommodate children affected by xenophobic violence. Now, you may recall that at the time, tens of thousands of African immigrants fled their homes, while dozens more lost their lives.
Foreigners under siege.
A wave of attacks on foreigners started in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. It quickly spread to most other provinces, eventually leaving 62 people dead.
Government says more than 43,000 people were displaced during the attacks. Many foreigners living in South Africa still fear for their safety.
I was staying at the Central Methodist and I was working in the Bishop's office. I have a bad experience of those moments, like seeing people being burned to death, right, having ties around their necks and then dying. And this person, right, was running away from a violent. They have seen maybe some of their relatives dying in front of them. Then they decided to run away to South Africa to seek refuge, only to realize that when they arrived in South Africa, it is worse than what they have seen. At that time, we were having over 5,000 people staying at Central Methodist, and people were struggling even to fit in. Right? So by that time, people were sleeping all over on the streets. Some people were sleeping outside. We realized that now we are having a lot of children who are staying at the church, and these children are of the age of going to school, but they are not going to school.
It was at this point that William and a few volunteers started the Albert Street School using a building belonging to the church. And with many children losing their parents in the violence, the school solely ran on public donations. Accommodating 1,000 learners, the number quickly swelled to hundreds within a year. Unlike your average school, unbelievably, teachers here rely on donations to feed their families.
I can tell you that the teachers are not paid for part of August last year and for the full part of September last year. Right? Up to present day, they are not paid, but they are doing their work without complaining. They are waking up every day, right? Mark the books in fun way, do what everything the teacher is doing, and producing outstanding results.
In normal circumstances, of course, it affects us. It affects me as well, because I'm a mother and I expect to be taking care of my two children. But considering the fact that I'm building something, there is something that is coming out of my work, then I tend to ignore the other side.
People with an experience of school systems that are working much better. And in the Zimbabwean case, it's a school system where people understand why knowledge is important and people are motivated to get it.
Okay, I'll stop the video there. But the essence of the video is that from an inequalities point of view, it actually depicts disadvantage, marginalization, and vulnerability. And from a capabilities point of view, it captures agency, which is seen through the teacher's action to start the school. And also, what is not shown here, what I found out from the school is that actually students go to the school because they are provided basic services. Like they have access to bathing facilities, they've got access to clothing, they've got access to shelter specifically designed for children who go to the school. So from there on, I'm trying to find a way where we can actually conceptualize inequality and these three concepts of the capabilities approach together, which is agency, conversion factors, and individual capabilities. So that is where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Faith.